Okay. All right. Well, good morning.
Morning.
It's good to see everybody today. Hope you've had a good week. Want to thank Woody for filling in for me last week. And I'm sure he did a great job. Sounds like he did. But appreciate that. So appreciate everybody's understanding about me not being here. Now that you know the reason why we weren't here. So
You still understand?
yeah. So, but anyways, but yeah, so we're going to pick back up today. We had gotten through chapter 7, verse 7 2 weeks ago, and the Lord was telling during that, in that past part of the passage, the Lord was telling Moses to go back to Pharaoh and talk to him, tell him, let my people go now. Not let my people go worship in a desert, let my people go. So God's up in the ante here and saying, up in the demand level, and God's not really willing to negotiate either. So, but and Moses is complaining and saying that, well, he didn't listen to me before. What makes you think he's going to listen to me now? And whatever. And we talked about how God told Moses that he would make him as a god to Pharaoh. And the Egyptians had numerous gods, some like 35, 45 commentators believe, gods that they worshipped, and they're gods of everything. And we're going to see as we go through that a lot of the plagues that strike are going against a god that is a god of the Egyptians. So, but but then we talked about how that God's a jealous God, and he doesn't want any other gods before him, so why would he make Moses as a god to Pharaoh? Well, it's not really as a god, but he's making it so that Pharaoh's going to respect Moses, respect what he says, not do it, but at least respect him so he doesn't kill him. Because you go to Pharaoh and make demands, you go to any king and make demands, you could find your head getting detached from your body, or some other way, so and we see that in a lot of the Old Testament where a lot of the prophets went and delivered a message from God and they got killed for it. And so, but he was making it so that Pharaoh wouldn't kill Moses and that Moses could be confident in that. And he even set Aaron up as his prophet. And so that because Moses objected to, the fact he didn't speak well or whatever. And so he was speaking through Aaron. So, he was basically how Pharaoh was going to look at them. So then we ended it out by talking about Moses was 80 years old and Aaron was 83. And so we all have a role in the church that we can be doing, because these guys weren't called until they were in their 80s to go and to do this incredible, huge thing. And so, there's always something that we can be doing in the church. And so, and if you feel that you can't do anything in the church, I'm going to send you to go talk to Mr. Hank, because he's been serving in the church all the way up, still serving all the way up through, and he's 93 now, right? 92. Okay. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to rush you. So,
let's not rush it.
Yeah, okay. So, but anyway, so that's kind of where we left off last week. So let's go to the Lord in prayer, and then we will continue on going through and see how far we get today. So, Heavenly Father, we just thank you and praise you that we can come into your house and study more about Moses and the life that he had, and see how it applies to our life. Lord, I just thank you that we're able to study your word and see everything that you have for us, and be able to do it in a free situation where we're not having to worry about being arrested and being persecuted and stuff. And Lord, we just thank you for that. Lord, I pray that you speak to us in a powerful way through this passage and help us to find out something that we didn't know before. And Lord, I just thank you and I praise you, and I ask this now in Jesus' name, amen. All right, so we're going to start out with 8 through 13. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and read those. And then the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, when Pharaoh speaks to you, saying, show a miracle for yourselves, then you shall say to Aaron, take your rod and cast it down before Pharaoh, and let it become a serpent. So Moses and Aaron went into Pharaoh, and they did so just as the Lord commanded. And Aaron cast down his rod before Pharaoh and before his servants, and it became a serpent. But Pharaoh also called the wise men and the sorcerers. So the magicians of Egypt, they also did it like the manner of with their enchantments. For every man threw down his rod, and they became a serpent. But Aaron's rod swallowed up all their rods. And Pharaoh's heart grew hard, and he did not heed them, as the Lord had said. All right. I'm sure that Moses and Aaron were probably feeling pretty confident that Moses was going to be like a god, Aaron was going to be like a prophet to Pharaoh, and okay, maybe they're going to listen to us. Maybe they're going to, God already told them that they weren't going to heed right away, but I'm sure that gave them a little confidence, because instead of objecting here, this is like the first time that God's told them to go talk to Pharaoh, and they're not objecting. Moses is not objecting, saying, "No, you got the wrong dude. Don't make me do this." Whatever. He's finally relented and everything. And trust me, from somebody who wants to argue with God, who I don't know that I want to, but I end up arguing with God a lot about stuff. It's a whole lot better when you just accept and do what He wants. But still, I'm stubborn. So, but wow, okay.
Well, that's like that day. It's been a few weeks back now, but you were in the kitchen just mumbling, and I'm like, "What are you doing?" And you said, "I'm fighting with God right now." And I said, "Why are you fighting? You know He's going."
Yeah, that's true. So but I have a lot of Moses tendencies in here when God kind of leads me to do something, and I'm just like, no, I don't want to do that. You need to get somebody else for that. So, but
not arguing, constructive criticism.
Constructive criticism of God?
Bruce argued.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Arguing.
Okay. All right. So, okay. So, yeah. So, but anyways, so yeah, okay, constructive criticism, arguing, however you want to view it, So, but so the Moses and Aaron are going in, and they're going in, and they're feeling good power, they're feeling confident about it. And then, how do you think they felt when when Aaron throws down his rod and it becomes a serpent, as God had instructed him? But then the magicians do the exact same thing. You think it kind of took some wind out of their sail, deflated them a little bit? Yeah. I mean, So, and that's the thing, and a lot of commentators, I read behind several, they believe that the magicians and stuff that Pharaoh had doing these signs were actually being powered, that those acts were being powered by Satan himself, because this was such a big thing that was going on. And so a lot of commentators believe that Satan was behind those and stuff. And we know that Satan will copy the things of God. He doesn't do new things. He copies God's things, what God does. And so it talks about that. I put it in your notes, 2 Thessalonians 2, 9 and 10. All right. So not only were Moses and Aaron going against Pharaoh and all the Egyptian gods, the 35 or 45 that we had, but most also believe that they were going against the enemy himself, against Satan himself. And so, but God showed that He was more powerful than theirs, because whose serpent swallowed up the rest of them?
God did. And it was 2-on-1.
Yeah, right. So Aaron's rod that became a serpent swallowed up the other ones. So just showing that God is more powerful, that what God does is always better and always more powerful than anything Satan can copy. Anything that the devil or his army of fallen angels can copy. Okay? But just as God predicted, Pharaoh's heart grew hard, and he did not release him. He didn't release the people to go at that point. And God had predicted that. God had said that that was going to happen. And so, it's, I don't know if Moses and Aaron were deterred by that or not. But they shouldn't have been.
I would probably give up at this point. Because like you said, they finally went without arguing with God.
Mm-hmm.
And it still didn't, in their mind,
Right.
it still didn't go the right way because he didn't release the people. So
Right.
I would be like, really, God? Really?
Yeah. Right. So I think I would be too. But again, like we said, God has told him numerous times in these chapters that we've read so far.
He was going to harden Pharaoh's heart.
Right.
Yeah.
He was going to continue to harden it because Pharaoh's heart was already hardened in the first place. But it's going to grow more hard as they go on. Okay. So, but this is just getting started. God's got this under control. But this is just getting started. So, have we ever had a time in our life where we've done what we thought God wanted and it hadn't worked out right away for us? Hadn't worked out by the expectation that we had?
Absolutely.
And how do we handle that?
I sat down and cried one time
Mm,
when I was
okay.
on support discovery the first time.
Yeah. So.
I was at my mother's house and nobody was there. And I
Yeah.
sat down on the floor and leaned back against the foot of the bed and boo-hooed.
Okay. That's one way to handle it.
Well,
So.
and of course thoughts were rushing through my mind and everything else, but yeah.
Right. Yeah. So.
I was thankful to be alone.
So. I mean,
But I haven't missed any meals either.
Yeah. Well, that's good. And
in relationship to that, needing more support.
right. And
But
I think I would think that this is something that a pastor struggles with a lot. You pour a lot of time, hours, and maybe even days into your sermon. And you feel really confident about it. You feel really good. It's a great sermon that God's given you, and you're gonna, you get up there and you preach this, and everything, and you feel like God's with you when you're preaching it, and then you give the invitation, and nothing. Nobody moves.
it appears to be.
Well, and that's true, and you have to trust that God's working on hearts, and you just can't see it. But sometimes we set our expectations on human expectations.
Most of the time.
Yeah, and because we think, well, we need to see results. We need to see something happen. We need, but
it goes back to God's time and God's plan.
mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So I know when Robbie was really, really young, and all she could do was bang his head and scream and carry on, and major throes of autism, and they diagnosed him as very low functioning and everything and stuff. And they said, you guys can start this therapy, this speech and occupational therapy, that'll help some, but we don't know how much. Now you look at him now. He's working, he's driving, he's doing, he does a lot of really good things. Couldn't be more proud of him. You still see some of the autistic traits in him, but he's so much better. But that didn't happen overnight. That was not anything that happened overnight. That was something that took years of Nicole taking him to all these appointments, therapies, and everything else to try to get him, and it's paid off. It's completely paid off. But it wasn't. There was a lot of times where we were just like, are we wasting our time? Are we wasting our money? We're not seeing any progress here. We're not seeing anything. And I'm sure it's like that with a lot of things. People battling cancer. They'll throw all the medicines, the chemo, the autoimmune they got now. They throw all this stuff at it, sometimes nothing really seems to work. And so, how but yet you're doing what you feel God is leading you to do, but you're not getting the result that you want, the result that you think should come of it, in the time that you think it should come. Okay? The end result's going to happen here. I'll give you a little, I think we all know anyways, but I'll give you a little secret to it, that the end result's going to happen. It's just going to be in God's plan and God's timing.
That's a good question. Can we circle back to the invitation?
Sure.
So, in that time, I'm gonna be honest, I don't know what that time is supposed to be for. So, if you write the sermon, you're supposed to go down.
Well, no.
No.
So, because I don't want them to think I didn't like it, I'm sitting right here. But
No.
at the time I did go down. Then everyone thought I was getting better. And then I messed up.
No, you didn't.
Nicole was here.
Yeah.
Like people thought that's what I was doing.
Okay.
And I felt really bad, but that's not what I meant, but I was moved by the sermon in other ways.
Right. If
I'm always confused what that time's supposed to be.
okay.
All of the above and other things.
Right, but if what was said and you feel that God has moved in your heart during that message, and you want to go forward and pray and have a minute with God or two or whatever, or get prayed over or whatever, then by all means go forward, no matter who else is up there going forward for baptism or church membership or anything else going on. Go forward. And if you just go forward. And see, there have been times where I've kind of, I haven't gone forward because the message he's preached about has been about sin or whatever and stuff. And it's like, and I kind of feel like I don't want to go forward because I don't want everybody to think that I'm got this major problem with sin that I'm trying to get over and stuff. And, a lot of people in the church look to me as a leader and stuff, and so that can definitely be something. But you shouldn't let the enemy take that away from you. If you feel that God has moved in your heart during the message and you want to go forward, go forward. Doesn't matter what else is going on. If you want to, but the other thing about the invitation, and it's probably not a great example to use because a lot of times people can be moved in their seat and they just don't come forward. And they pray there because for whatever reason they don't want to come forward because they don't want everybody to see them come forward and stuff. And so, but if you look, I mean, I've stood up there and preached what I felt was a really good message, and I look out and there's just people just don't look like they're engaged at all. It's like people are, and I'm just like, wait a minute, God, I'm up here putting it all out here for you, and I thought you were going to do amazing work. And I'm looking at the people, and there's like no reactions, there's nothing. And then give the invitation, and there's just, and like I said, we can't totally judge everything that's going on because somebody's heart might be getting touched in a powerful way, but we just don't know it because they don't go forward. So the whole going forward thing is probably a bad example. But in answer to your question, if you feel God moving in your heart and you want to go forward and pray and do it. Don't worry about whatever else is going on and anything. Okay. So, but I understand your struggle because a lot of times I've kind of, and really the day I feel like I gave my heart and surrendered to the Lord, they did an invitation and I desperately wanted to go forward, but I just felt like my feet wouldn't move. I was at a church camp and really felt God, really felt God that night. And I wanted to go forward, And I just, my feet, for some reason I couldn't pick my feet up to go. And I was actually even to the point that I was kind of, leaning, trying to go, and I just couldn't go. And that was what one of the camp counselors saw me and came up to me afterwards and spoke to me. And then I told him, yeah. And so we sat down and right there in the chairs and I prayed and surrendered my heart and life to God. And that was what an incredible feeling that was that night. Just just knowing that I had made that decision and everything and stuff. And so it's, you know, I get what you're saying, because sometimes you just feel, and I'm sure that the enemy comes in and tries to convince you that no, you don't want to go forward. What's this person going to think? What's that person going to think? Doesn't matter. If you're having a move in your heart, then you want to go forward, then follow it. So, okay, does that help? Yeah. Okay. All right. We're good. So, but yeah. So, but I know they're probably thinking, well, you know, we did what God told us and nothing, and their guys can do the same thing. So what's all, you know? But we're gonna see that they really didn't let it get to them, and they apparently finally accepted that God said this was going to be a process. That Pharaoh is not gonna let it go easily, and so and like we say, this battle is just getting started. We know this story. I'm not, you know, we're trying to pick some new things out of here and try to help and see how it applies. The main thing I wanted to see about the life of Moses is not so much the events, but when I felt led to do this, I wanted to show how we ourselves are like Moses. And I don't know about the rest of y'all, but he's really laid it on me, especially when I'm arguing with God. I've seen myself in Moses so much here and everything. So, but yeah. So, okay. Any questions about that? Comments, thoughts? No? All right. Well, let's continue on then. We're going to read 14 through the rest of the chapter, 14 through 25. Okay. So the Lord said to Moses, Pharaoh's heart is hard. He refuses to let the people go. Go to Pharaoh in the morning when he goes out to the water, and you shall stand by the river's bank to meet him. And the rod which was turned into a serpent you shall take in your hand. And you shall say to him, the Lord God of the Hebrews has sent me to you, saying, let my people go, so that they may serve me in the wilderness. But indeed, until now you would not hear. Thus says the Lord, by this you shall know that I am the Lord. Behold, I will strike the waters which are in the river with the rod, and that is in my hand, and they shall be turned to blood. And the fish that are in the river shall die, the river shall stink, and the Egyptians will loathe to drink the water of the river. The Lord spoke to Moses, say to Aaron, take your rod and stretch out your hand over the waters of Egypt, so there are streams over the rivers, over the ponds, and over the pools of water, and that they shall become blood. And there shall be blood throughout the land of Egypt, both in buckets of wood and pitchers of stone. And Moses and Aaron did so just as the Lord commanded. So he lifted up his rod and struck the waters that were in the river, and the sight of Pharaoh, and in the sight of his servants. And all the waters that were in the river were turned to blood. The fish that were in the river died, and the river stank, and the Egyptians could not drink the water out of the river. So there was blood throughout all the land of Egypt. Then the magicians of Egypt did so with their enchantments, and Pharaoh's heart grew hard, and he did not heed them as the Lord had said. And Pharaoh turned and went into his house. Neither was his heart moved by this. So all the Egyptians dug around the river for water to drink, because they could not drink the water of the river. And 7 days passed after the Lord had struck the river. All right. So here we see the first plague. All right. Tells Moses to go out. Pharaoh's going to come out to the river and look at the river and see, because, again, there is a God of the river. The Nile is the major source of food and income and whatever for the Egyptians. That's their prosperity, is that river. It's a God. There's a God over it. They got a God over everything. And, you know, do we have gods over everything? Do we have? I mean, I know we don't particularly say, yes, oh, I got a God of, you know, my house, and I have a God for my car or whatever. But don't sometimes we value things so much that we make gods out of them? that we take and say, you know, this is like a God to me. This is, you know, even though we're not supposed to, but we do sometimes, I think. So, you know, we're not, in some ways we're not a whole lot different than the Egyptians, because we sometimes, a lot of people make a god of money. A lot of people will make a god of about anything: power, money, possessions, family, right? Yeah, exactly. So yeah, exactly. Some people take their kids and will spoil their kids and do so much for their kids, and never train them up in the way that they should go. Never train them up in the ways that are right or whatever. Never take that time to discipline or whatever and stuff, and just basically treat them as a god and stuff. And so, but getting back to this, there's a God over the river. And that's the first God is going at, that our God, the Yahweh, is going after. The Egyptians had a little g God over the river. And there's gods over all these things, these plagues. And it's kind of hard to believe that there's gods over lice and locusts and flies and things like that, but there is, So they had gods over that and stuff. And so he really strikes out, and he does. He puts it out there, and he turn it to blood. He turned all the water in the land to blood. Okay? Now, most commentators, again, this is most commentators, it's not in the Bible, but this is most commentators believe that in Goshen, where the Hebrews were, that was their encampment in the land of Egypt, that in their area, the water did not turn to blood. That the Hebrews were not subject to these
The rivers,
plagues.
just the rivers.
Anything fresh water, the rivers, the ponds, even it says here, even the buckets of wood and the pitchers of stone. So even if there was
Except for the earth,
right, pretty much, yeah, anything fresh water. So, but like I say, a lot of commentators believe that in the areas where the Hebrews dwelled, and which was the land of Goshen, part of Egypt, that it didn't affect them, that they weren't bothered by these plagues. And then it showed, and then of course the Passover, we know that because they did what God commanded them, they weren't affected by that plague either at the end. But again, that's most commentators. And a lot of commentators believe that in the end days, in the Great Tribulation, that when those plagues are striking the earth and whatever, those judgments are coming, that those aren't going to affect any Christians that will be here at that point. When the sun turns so hot, which I can't possibly imagine is going to get much hotter than it is right now, but when the sun turns so hot that it's just unbearable, that that they believe, it's believed that plague, that the Christians at that time are not going to be as affected by those plagues and those judgments as everybody else. And that, we see that God can do that, because he does it with the Passover, and we know that God can do that. He can protect a group of people, and he can extract judgment on a group of people. And so that's, again, though, but I don't have anywhere scripturally to back that up, but that's what commentators believe. So we'll kind of bear that in mind. There may be some plagues where it actually says that it didn't bother the Hebrews, but I'm not sure on that. I haven't read far enough ahead and refreshed myself as far as that. But I know that's the belief of most commentators. And a lot of people question, well, if all the water got turned to blood, then how did the magicians find something to be able to do the same feat? Well, there was obviously something. And then we see here that apparently there was a lot of water up underneath the ground, because they say that the Egyptians started digging wells basically next to the river, trying to find some clean water. And so the magicians might have dug a little bit and found some water, and then turned it to blood themselves, just to prove that what Moses and Aaron did here was nothing special. And so again, they go and show a miraculous sign, and Pharaoh doesn't acknowledge it. He turned And this is an important point too. He turned because Moses didn't ask in this passage for them to be released. He says, God told me to tell you to release them. You didn't do it, so this is what we're going to do. And he does it. And then the next thing would have been for him to say, okay, are you going to release us? Are you going to release us now? And Pharaoh turns. He turned and went into his house. Verse 23. Neither was his heart moved by this. Okay? So he didn't even give Moses a chance to ask for the release. And that's something I hadn't caught until I was reading through and reading some commentaries and stuff, and one of the commentators pointed that out, and I was just like, wow, yeah, valid point. They didn't, he didn't even give them a chance to ask him. I mean, he already knew what they were going to ask for, but he didn't even give them the respect enough to hear them out, to even acknowledge that what was done. Okay.
So how long,
Okay. There's no dumb questions.
how long did the rivers and stuff stay blood?
Um,
I mean, like, as the plagues go up, like next week when we bring in the second plague, is the river still blood? Or is that kind of...
I'm going to need to research that a little bit because I'm not exactly sure and I don't want to misspeak. I know that it says here that 7 days passed after the Lord had struck the river, but that's before they go back again, I think, because it's setting it up for the second plague. There's 7 days between the first and the second plague by what this says here. So I would assume that the rivers are still blood at this point, but I don't know how long it lasts. I did read in one commentary, and I'll have to go back and look at that one, that one commentator said that the total time of all these plagues was 14 months or something like that. It was over a year. And so I don't know if but some of the plagues are not, we don't know how long it is between each plague and stuff. And so, and we see at some points here that Pharaoh calls Moses in. Some of these plagues, Pharaoh calls Moses in and say, okay, I'll let the people go, end this plague. And so Moses and Aaron end the plague. Pray to God, stretch out the rod, end the plague. Frogs go away or whatever, But I don't know about this one. I don't know if it lasted the full 14 months or if it was just the 7 days or what. I don't know. So I'll have to dig into that and find out. I'll have that answer next week. So yeah. So, but so he's seeing the power of God. Pharaoh's seeing the power of God, and yet he's not moved. Does that happen now? Do people see the power of God? And then, I've got a lot of experience with doctors because of the stuff that I've had in my life go on, and with Nicole and with Robbie and stuff like that. Okay, and I have seen a couple different attitudes from doctors when things happen. One, some of them get a God complex. Oh, I did that. That was me. I did that. I healed you. Surgery I did, I healed you. Others know that there's a God, and they trust that God is working in them, and they know that there's, and they'll freely tell you. I mean, and we had 2 different cancer doctors through her time look at us after it looked extremely bleak, and then they go and they do more tests and find out that, whoa, it's not as bad as we thought. And we had 2 different doctors look at us and say, we don't know how that's possible. And they don't come right out and say that God did that, but we just kind of looked at them and say,
bragging.
They weren't bragging either, exactly. but they just said, we can't explain that. We don't know how that happened. We don't know how that's possible. And we just
Do
Kindly.
you think they do that because they think they might get in trouble
maybe,
because of the people they talking to?
yeah, maybe, and if we were atheists and they told us that God did it, then they would probably get really upset. We would probably get really upset. So yeah, so they probably, whatever. So, because, and then it might, in some people's eyes, it might make them look weak or not smart as a doctor to be saying, well, I don't know how that happened. I guess it was God, or it was God that did that, or that's the only way, but I mean, so they choose their words carefully, but when you got two doctors that come, and the second one, he was just like, really like, there's no reason this should have happened like this. That what we did in the surgery was that cancer filled, and now there's nothing. We can't find any more cancer in her body right now, except for that one little spot that we've known about. Then, and he was just so. It was almost like he wanted to say it, but he didn't. But he, and we just kind of, she said, "Well, I know who did it then," and he kind of he nodded his head in agreement and acknowledgement with it, and so it was like, and so but yeah, but doctors, like I say, doctors in some ways, and there's probably, I'm not trying to say that they're either one way or the other, because there's, I'm sure there's both and stuff like that or whatever. But there are some guys, some doctors that really believe that they are just, wow, The one that did her back surgery or whatever, he had a serious God complex, no sense of humor, and a serious God complex, So, because we tried to crack a joke with that man, and he was, no, you don't do that. So, but she never, in both of those surgeries, she got some relief, but she never got healed. And so I don't understand his God complex, So, but anyways, but he had a serious one. So, but, and like I say, I'm sure that there's all kinds of, because just like everything else, there's people that are good, and there's people that are bad, and there's people that are really good, and there's people that are really bad. So there's all, and so, I'm sure there's a lot, but like I say, this has been kind of my experience that I've seen, that some doctors think that it's all them, and then others believe in God, and that I think some even believe that God is working through them when good things do happen with their patients.
I had a
And stuff.
surgery one time, well, it was some years ago. I remember before the surgery, they had a doctor come in and talk to you right before they moved you out. He actually come in there and asked me to do play with me.
Yeah, that's good.
I had real good confidence.
Yeah.
After that.
Mm.
And I didn't like me. I can't remember what it was or where it was or whatever, but I will always, even though I can't remember, I always remember that surgeon come in there and prayed and asked God, to guide his hands and all this stuff.
That's good right there.
Cool.
If he does that with every patient, that's awesome. So, and,
Video going around from my doctor and the he talks and there's like a random piano in the hospital and playing and singing that Spanish and English. Someone's like filming it as they're walking by. So he's not doing it for a show. I guess he just sat down. It was beautiful. And everyone's like, I want to know who that doctor is.
Yeah.
It just sounds like he has such a passion.
Yeah. So, and I know that when I had my nose broken and the doctor did the surgery or whatever and stuff, and the doctor told Nicole, I've got his nose better than it ever was, better than when he was born.
Wow.
Okay. I'm like, wow, can we reel this in a little? Because you got to see, okay. So, but yeah. So here we see, okay, so now the plagues are striking, and Pharaoh's heart is just being hardened. He's not relenting. He's just not doing anything. He's not even giving Moses and Aaron the time to even talk about it. So, okay. And with that, we got to kind of go. So, but we are at the end. We will pick up on the second plague.